evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I know that Kevin Costner is around the corner at only $1,000 a throw at the museum. Probably why you're here, right? um, it's a fundraiser for the Museum of the West. So I thought the traffic might be a real problem for you all. But anyway, it's great to see you. I'm Barbara Peters. I'm the owner of the Poison Pen. We are in our 35th year. And I would like to thank Dr. Julia Files from Mayo and Dr. Ian K. Smith from Chicago, my own hometown, for giving us a chance to do something else with a different community, because we are primarily a fiction bookstore. And this is great to have this opportunity to do something else. So I wanted to talk to you for just a moment. Dr. Smith is here to talk to you about nutrition and all the various paths that studying medicine and becoming a doctor has led him on. He's a crime fiction writer, and he writes this killer series about a private eye set in Chicago. So you can see already why I am so taken with him. And I think part of the versatility that you'll be talking about tonight is his career as a writer of fiction. And they're surprising. Oh, good. Come and join us. We have plenty of chairs right up here. Surprisingly, for a city the size of Chicago, there are very few writers of fiction or crime fiction at all. So I feel like Ian is worth like 10. Anyway, they're a lot of fun, and they will give you a different picture of Chicago than the one that I grew up in. I have one quarrel to pick with you about this book, okay? So we're talking about nutrition 30s, if I have this right, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s.
No, 60s plus.
Yeah, well, I am 84, and there is no good information. Well, maybe there is. You're going to talk to me about what I should be eating, right? But I would like to say that thanks to Dr. Files, I'm doing okay at 84, so I'm really grateful to her for that. And on that note, I encourage you to pick up one of the crime fiction paperbacks while you're here, not just the nutrition book, because they're so much fun. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Files.
Thank you, Barbara. So I will be brief. My name is Julia Files. I'm an internist at Mayo Clinic, and I would like to thank Barbara for letting me participate in this event tonight with Dr. Smith. I mean, what an amazing human being. And I am the founder and president of Ignite Med. And Ignite Med was founded as an organization to assist women medical students, to equip them with the skills that they need to become thriving physicians in the specialty of their choice. And we are teaching what we describe as the hidden curriculum, the skills that I learned and my colleagues learned through the School of Hard Knocks. And we want to teach you what you need to know to be successful. We're facing a looming crisis in medicine, which is burnout. Burnout is affecting physicians. 50% of physicians surveyed will report burnout during their careers, and burnout can lead to depression, anxiety, and even suicide. In my tenure at Mayo Clinic, there have been 3 physician suicides. And so it's a very real threat and a very real thing. And when I founded this organization, I thought, well, what if we build the fire bright enough that it will carry the women through burnout so they won't burn out, and thus the name Ignite Med. So if you would humor me, if you're a medical student, please stand up. We'd like to honor you briefly. Thank you so much for coming, because you are our future. And one of the things I had asked of Dr. Smith is if he could briefly talk about his path to where he is now, because, the things you learn in medical school can be used for many different paths in your life. The skills that you have, where you are now, the tenacity, the grit, your intelligence, right? You don't have to be stuck. And so with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Smith. And again, thank you so much. And thank you for coming on a Friday night. You guys are amazing. So thank you.
You're going to stay here, right? Or are you going to sit down? Oh, okay.
But I think I should turn off my microphone.
No, it's okay.
Leave it? I'll just put it like that.
Okay. Let me start off by saying you can call me either Ian or Dr. Ian. Dr. Smith is very formal. And I tell people, don't call me Dr. Smith. It feels like, too straight. I'm Ian or Dr. Ian. So either one is fine. I'm very happy to be here. I love Barbara. and I love this store. And for those of you who are in medicine, this is the Mayo Clinic of bookstores. So you understand how prestigious it is to be in these walls. So it's those of us. My other hat is a literary person. This is like a wonderful opportunity. So anytime I can come back, I'm very happy to come back. And I played golf yesterday, so that was very nice. Oh yeah. So any golfers here, by the way? Yeah. So yesterday I hit a 331-yard drive. It was ridiculous, and I was shocked. I, of course, took videos. It's on Instagram. So I called my wife, and she was just like, "Oh, okay." But I was like, "Sweetie, I hit 331 yards." Anyway, so listen, I'm very happy to be here. When Barbara told me about this and the program that was started, it just registered with me. I'm old now. I'm 55. So I've been at this for black black don't crack. Yeah. But I, my journey in medicine has been very different. And I've cut across the grain most of my career, to the chagrin of many, including my mother. But I've always been a very independent person. And my mother taught me how to think and how to make decisions for myself. I grew up, with just a single mom. So I'm always referring. I have a very female perspective of things, by the way, because I learned through my mother. But she always taught me how to think and then make decisions on your own. And so that's, and don't regret decisions either. I mean, you're going to make mistakes, but, be committed to your decisions in life. And so my career in medicine, and I won't be very long because I also think that this is nice to have a back and forth. The two of us can speak to you all about what you want. My career in medicine has been very unorthodox. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon my whole life since I was 9. And then when I got into medical school and was doing my clinical rotations and was so excited to be with the neurosurgeons, it was awful. And I'm just speaking about my experience. I don't want to cast aspersions on other neurosurgeons, but where I was a medical student, it was terrible. They were miserable. They didn't have good lives. They were unhappy. They weren't nice to patients. It just was all this great visions that I had of neurosurgeons was just crushed. And I was lost. I was like, what am I going to do now? Like, I can't see myself living like this. I'm an athlete. I like to write fiction even back then. Like, I like all these different things. I'm just not like a doctor, just like a typical doctor. And so everyone kept saying, you should try orthopedic surgery. And I didn't want to do that because med students know that jocks, for those who don't know, the stereotype orthopedic surgeon is a jock, a former athlete, right? Brawny guys who, tell inappropriate jokes and that kind of stuff. And I just didn't want to be stereotypical. So I just didn't want to do it. But then I was like, well, let me try a rotation. And I loved it. It was fun to hang out with these guys. We had great conversations. The surgeries were fun. The patients were fun. No one ever died, in orthopedic surgery. So that was nice. So I fell in love with orthopedic surgery. But when I was I'm talking to med students now. When I was a fourth-year medical student and had finished all the hard stuff, I decided before I became a doctor to try something I'd never done before. And I would not be able to do probably for the rest of my life because I thought medicine was just going to completely take over. And I've always been a news junkie. And so I wanted to see what it was like inside of a newsroom. And so I haven't told the story very often, by the way, in public. But my wife my wife went to medical school and law school. So she was in law school in her last year at the time that I was in my last year of medical school. We went to the same school. And I said to her, you know what? I'm going to try to get an internship in the newsroom. She's like, what? I was like, well, I'm going to graduate and become a grunt as an intern in the hospital next year. I'm going to get killed, so I might as well have some fun before they kill me. And so she and I were at a dinner, and as a poor medical student, anything that was a free meal we went to. And her father was a prominent lobbyist in Chicago, and so we got invited to all these fancy things. And we'd go just to get a nice meal. Oh, my goodness. Even now, I just so grateful. And so one night, they invited me to this museum, and it was being hosted by NBC. And so we went to it, and when I went into the big room, the gala, I saw this guy who I'd watched on the news every single morning. he was on from 5 to 7. And I saw the guy in person. I was like, oh, my goodness, like, this guy is here. And so I just walked up to him and said, can I be your intern? Just like that. And he said, sure, of course you can. This is pre 9/11, by the way. And he was like, sure. I was like, okay, what do I do? He said, just come down to the station next week. I'm on from 5 to 7. Tell the security guard Art sent you, and they'll let you into the newsroom. And so next week I did that. And I said, I showed up, and I said, yeah, Art told me to come in. Oh, come on in. And so I started my internship with this anchor at NBC in Chicago. And I had nothing to do with medicine. We were covering fires and murders and just regular stories in the news, but I was in heaven. I got to see how they shot things, how they put the stories together. I helped to write the packages. It was just wonderful. So I had this experience, and then, of course, reality set in. I graduated from medical school, and so I matched in orthopedic surgery in New York City, and then my life was over. And so all the fun that I was having was completely gone. And God bless you. And then what happened was Art's wife got uterine cancer. And I was in Paris at the time. It was my one as an intern. I don't know if it's still, we had 4 weeks as an intern in the hospital. Is that still the same? Vacation?
Oh, I don't even know now.
Oh, yeah, we had, is it same? We had 4 weeks. You couldn't take them consecutively. So one of my weeks, I went to Europe because my best friend from college, who was on the tennis tour, was over in Europe. And I didn't have any money, but we stayed in these little hostels and stuff like that. And I'd never been there. I wanted to go really badly. So I was over there, and that's when Art paged me. We had pagers. They still have pagers?
We do.
Yeah. Sorry. And so they paged me, and he said that his wife had uterine cancer. And I said, don't worry, I'm going to come home. When I come to New York, I'll fly to Chicago and help you guys understand what's going on. I didn't know a lot. I was an intern, but, So I flew back home and flew to Chicago to be with Art and his wife. And we were sitting there watching in his living room. She was sleeping upstairs, and we were watching the news that day. And he turned to me and said, you could do that. I said, do what? He said, you could be on TV. How could I be on TV? I've never been on TV before. Like, I used to run around with you as an intern, but that wasn't for real. I was just, he said, no, I think you have what it takes. So he convinced me. We talk about mentorship and sponsorship. He convinced me on that Sunday afternoon to go to the station, which I had no intentions of doing. He called up Hetty Zussman, who was the editor when I was an intern. A little short lay old Hetty. Hetty was great. And he said, Hetty, I got Ian in town. Come into the station. Let's put together a little resume reel for him of the stuff that he shot when he was an intern. She said, sure. So we put this little resume reel together, and it was awful. It was just so awful. And I flew back to New York, went back to the hospital, getting killed as an intern, and Art called me and said, hey, I can make an introduction for you to the news director of NBC in New York. I said, Art, how can I work in the #1 market at NBC? He's like, you got it, kid. And I was like, okay. And so he gave me a meeting with the news director. She looked at my tape, which was awful, in front of me. So she's watching me, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm sweating all over the place. And she said to me after watching, it was like 3 minutes, she says, you're rough, but you have something in there. So I said, okay. And so a week later, they hired me to come on and do medical reports at NBC in New York. And I totally took the job because I wanted the money. Nothing. But they're asking me basic questions that, what is the cold? We know what the cold is. It wasn't complicated medicine. So to you guys, it may be complicated. To us, it was like, So I accepted it. Listen, my theory in life has always been say yes and figure it out later. That's how I operate. I do. And so I said yes and figured it out later. And so, but they were paying me every single time I got on TV. And I was broke. I was making no money. I was living in Manhattan, way above my head. I had all kinds of school debt, credit card debt, but I was making a little bit of money. And so this was getting pretty good. And I said to the producer, I said, I'm doing once a week, but if you want to, I can do twice a week. She said, you can? I said, yes. And she goes, come on in twice a week. So I'm just, cha-ching, I'm just like calculating this. And so I was on 5 days a week. I'd worked my way up 5 days a week while I was an intern. It was nuts. My apartment was a disaster. My life was a disaster. I was no, I wasn't married yet. My girlfriend. She was still my girlfriend then. She's not my wife, but she was my girlfriend then. And she was telling me I was crazy, but she supported me. And so it took off. This career took off in TV. No intentions, by the way. And so all of a sudden, I was making so much money at the TV station that the news director called me into the office, and I thought she was going to fire me. I didn't know why she called me in. I had my own desk. I had like a real life as a reporter. It was great. But I was a grunt in the hospital, so I had both lives happening, right? And she calls me in and she says, "We got to talk." I was like, oh my goodness, I made a mistake on air. I said something wrong. And she said, "You're making too much money." And I was like, "I am?" She goes, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, I'll cut back my days. I don't have a problem with that. I didn't want her to take everything away from me. I was just paying my rent on time, eating out once a week." And she says, "No, you have to work for us full time." I said, "What does that mean?" She goes, "You need to be an employee now of NBC." I said, "Well, I'm in residency." She goes, "We'll accept that. You can do both." And so they made me get an agent. She said, she pushed a little paper. She goes, "These are the 5 best agents in New York City. And I'm going to fight with all of them. But I'm going to help you out and tell you, you got to get one of these guys to help you. Because they have to negotiate against me now to give you a contract." And then my career took off. And I'll end this part of it with a funny story. So I was on air all the time. People knew me as Dr. Ian. But I was still a grunt in the hospital. I was a nothing in the hospital. And one day we were rounding. Rounding means that you're with the team, talking to the patients in the morning. I was rounding with the team, and our chairman was there. And the chairman never rounds with us because he's too important. And he was rounding one day. We're in this patient's room, and it's kind of a hierarchy. So the chairman, chief resident, down to me, who's the bottom guy. And so we're standing there, and the chairman's talking to this patient and saying, "Yeah, Miss So-and-so, da, 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 da." When he finishes his little speech, we're stone silent, of course. The patient turned to me and said, "Is that true, Dr. Ian?" So my career in orthopedic surgery was not very long because it wasn't going to happen. And so I had to make a decision about what I wanted to do with my life. As much as I loved ortho, I loved the surgeon, loved the guys, I was also loving that I was able to talk to millions of people and help them on TV. And so I said to my mother, who panicked, that I was going to take a year off from residency. I said, "Mom, but I have millions of patients now, and I could talk to people and help them with diabetes and high blood pressure." And they listen, and they need this information. And so I did that, and then I switched my residency to physiatry, which is rehab medicine, which is much easier. And the guys are much nicer, and surgeons are surgeons. And so then that was my career. And my career took off in medicine, and I started writing, and so I wrote for Time Magazine, I wrote for Newsweek, I reported for Tom Brokaw. You guys are too young, but he's like he's an NBC juggernaut. No, but the med students don't know who Tom Brokaw is. But it was great, and so that's how my career has been. Very unorthodox. I do what I want to do. I enjoy what I do. I'm very happy. I don't work for anybody. But I want to tell the med students that and if you want to do academic medicine or research, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, clinical medicine. But don't feel like you're pigeonholed to have to do what everyone else is doing. Medicine, you can practice medicine in many ways, and you can have patients in many ways, just like lawyers. Lawyers aren't always practicing law. They do all kinds of things with their degree. And so I want you guys, in this day and age, unlike when I did it, which was completely anathema to what was expected, I want you guys to feel the freedom to use your degree and your knowledge in all kinds of different ways, and don't feel like you're less than someone who becomes a surgeon, because you can treat people in many different ways, and you can help people in many different ways. I write books that touch millions of people, and I try to give them good information. And a surgeon's only going to have a certain number of patients in his lifetime. So I just want you guys to have that kind of inspiration. Real fast before we open the floor, Eat Your Age is my latest health book. And this book came about because so many people were asking me on Instagram or Facebook, they were asking me, why is it that they're in their 50s or 60s plus, and they can't eat the same food anymore, or they can't move the same way? And what I realized was that people weren't understanding that for every decade of your life, you have to have adaptations to how you eat, how you power yourself, how you move. And so I really wanted to write a book for people to understand for each decade, these are your top nutrients. These are your best exercises. These are the medical tests, screening tests that you need to be careful of. These are the medical conditions that are lurking around the corner. And then at the end of each decade, I give you a 30-day meal plan that customized to your decade that gives you these power nutrients in a very simple way. And it's a fun book. I like the book. It's for a lot of people. But this is part of what I do. I just try to take information that we as doctors know very well and try to translate it, not dumb it down, but translate it into a palatable way so that people can put it and use it in their life right away. That's my whole career. My whole career is how information can be actionable to change your life. That's what I want to do for you. And that's what Eat Your Age is. And it starts in your 30s and it goes all the way up. So there you go. I think we'll open the floor and we'll take questions and have a conversation. I want to say this, though, that after hearing about the organization, that I think that every female doctor should contribute something to this organization to help women in medicine. My mother-in-law is a psychiatrist, and she would always tell me the horrible stories about being the only woman on the surgical team or her team and how they just abused her because she was a woman. And it was horrible. And I just kept saying, how did you even, and you're a black woman, like how did you even deal with all that back then? And she was just tough. She's about four, she's your height. But she's tough. She's from the south side of Chicago, and she hung in there. But I wish she had had your organization back then. Now, she made it, but it would have been easier for her, I think, to have a community. And so I hope that, and I'm going to try to help you, I hope that a lot of women, any physicians, not just women, by the way, but women in particular should relate to this kind of organization to help young female medical students, who we need, by the way. We need female doctors, we need black doctors, we need Asian, we need all kinds of doctors because we all bring a different experience. And it's just good for patients, you know? So anyway, I hope that we can get more support for your organization.
Well, thank you. So aren't you inspired? I'm very, very inspired. I mean, that is just amazing. And I really appreciate you sharing with the students that there are lots of opportunities, and I like your attitude, just say yes and figure it out later. That's wonderful, because you never know when you meet someone what might happen, right? You just never know. And taking a chance on a Friday night, coming out and doing something very different, you never know. I mean, I didn't know Dr. Smith, and I'm just so in awe and humbled to meet you. I really think that it's very amazing. I mean, what a story, right? So does anyone have any questions?
Sure.
I relate to you in a couple ways. I want to be an orthopedic. Oh, okay. I want to be an orthopedic surgeon, and so that's currently my dream.
Okay.
I know it wasn't your path. And then I'm also in the public health program at my school because it drives me insane to think the only people I could help are the ones in a 20-mile radius of my clinics. So I don't know where my career is going to take me. And I like to think that I'm a free thinker and an independent thinker, but I can't imagine being in your position where you had this plan to be an orthopedic surgeon and all of a sudden it just wasn't your calling. So did you have a lot of backlash from colleagues, your girlfriend, your family? And if so, how did you handle that to do what you wanted to do?
Well, ortho really was my calling, and so was TV, and I just couldn't marry the two. Like, I miss ortho, by the way. Ortho's the best surgery, by the way. I just miss it. But I just felt like at the time I had to make a decision, and because of my chairman and other, they were being aggressive. They were being passive aggressive. They were doing things to make my life hard. They would schedule meetings when they knew I had to be on TV, so I had to make it. They just started messing around with me. So I just felt like doing the TV route, I could do more things with it, and I could help more people. But I have to say, my girlfriend has always supported me, now my wife. All my craziness, she has always supported me. And she's also like me. I mean, she went to Harvard Medical School, University of Chicago Law School, and she now is the CEO of a set of healthcare clinics that help poor people in Chicago. So we're different like that, and so we really get along that way. But my mother did not support me at first. She was very upset at me, and she thought I was wasting my whole medical career and everything else. Then when her friend called her and said, I saw Ian on TV, she loved it. Why aren't you on TV more? Like, I'm not kidding you. Like, you didn't come on today. So you have to, I think in life, you have to find a community and support, no matter who you are or what you do. And you have to lean into those people. And I've always had friends and loved ones who I could always go to, and no matter how zany my ideas would be, they would support me. And you have to find that, right? I call it your tribe. You got to find your tribe. And that's all. You don't need 100 people, by the way. You need a few people who will say, come on, you can do it, to lift you up. And I think that's what you have to do. I love the idea that you also want to do public health. I think we need to have, especially now, we need to have smart people who are going to keep fighting for the public health of the country. I'm old, like I said, so I'm kind of finishing up my career. But I'm very worried about public health. I'm very worried. I think that we're in a very dangerous time. We're talking about, rolling back vaccines, for example. And if, we know that, for example, the Salk vaccine is one of the greatest inventions, of the 20th century, that saved millions of lives and prevented millions of disfigurement. And now all of a sudden that may go away. I mean, what's going to happen? So I'm nervous. And I'm really nervous for people who are not health literate, who can't really understand. And they listen to TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all this chatter out there. And so you can imagine how these people are going to be misguided. So I'm saying all that to say that you being in public health is important. And you don't have to be just an orthopedic surgeon. You could do both of them. And you can operate and still have a voice in the public health sector. I think that's very good.
Would you let me move the microphone around? Does anybody have a question? Otherwise, they can't hear you on the streaming thing. Anybody else have a question? Don't be shy. Come on. All right. Okay, you can come up and give those too, but let's let this lady talk.
Hi, my name's Erin. I'm a medical student at Creighton. I helped start a nutrition and medicine program at Creighton because I felt, with Dr. Harder, who's here, we just felt like nutrition was such a big part of health and it wasn't talked about enough in medical school. And so I want to hear about how you got into nutrition and dieting. And we also talk a lot about how the social media has also negatively impacted like our experiences, but so many of our patients' experiences with nutrition. So we talk a lot about like what TikTokers say, what like how to actually look through these studies that they quote, how to look through these good studies. So I feel like good books and things like that are even more important now than ever. But how have you navigated that part of, you're talking about dieting and how people react to your book, and then also what brought you into nutrition?
Okay, that's a great question, by the way. Before I answer that question, I just want to say that you are very pretty. Okay? You.
Are you making a sexist remark?
No, yes. But can I tell you something? You remind me of? When I was a kid, I watched soap operas with my grandmother because that's what she watched. So I watched all the soap operas. And my favorite actress of all time played Kate Chancellor on Young and the Restless. And I love Kate Chancellor. And let me tell you something. When I was in New York, this is really a side, by the way, but it's okay. It's a Friday night, right? When I was working at NBC, they had the Emmy Awards at NBC. And I was leaving 30 Rock. And I was walking to Fifth Avenue to go home. And who was standing at the corner? Was Kay Chancellor. I was in heaven. And I said to her, oh my goodness, my grandmother had passed. I said, my grandmother and I watched you every single day. She would be so, and she was so nice. She gave me a kiss. Her name was Jean Stapleton. But you have you're very elegant and very, so you make me feel good because I'm now thinking of my grandmother. But, so anyway.
I have to start eating better or I won't look like
No, you look great. You look great. Anyway, okay, to your question. Okay. Let me tell you my nutrition training in med school. You ready for this?
It's all about the digressions.
We had half a day, and the GI doctor did the nutrition training. And the only reason we went is because they served lunch. We learned absolutely nothing. We didn't pay attention to it. It was a throwaway thing. And so when I decided, this is how I got into nutrition, by the way. I taught myself nutrition. When I decided to write, I was writing for Time Magazine in my column. And every time I wrote an article, the emails were always about either weight loss, nutrition, or fat burners. I write an article on the Tylenol scare. How do you lose weight? So everything I wrote about, it came back to nutrition and weight loss. I said, what is going on here? And I knew nothing about it. And I felt really stupid that my readers who loved me, I couldn't answer their questions. I felt helpless. And so I said, that's it. And so a publisher reached out to me and said, Dr. Ian, do you want to write a book? Of course I do. And they said, okay. I said, well, what do you want me to write? Whatever you want. I said, great. I'm going to write a diet book. Because I wanted to help people, my readers, understand nutrition. And so this is almost before the internet, by the way. I mean, so the internet wasn't like it is now. You could do everything on the internet now. But I had to really do a deep dive in learning nutrition from the ground up. What is a calorie? You know, what is fiber? We weren't taught any of that stuff. Now I think it's a little better. And so I taught myself nutrition. And then once I figured it out, I said, okay, now I feel like I got a good handle on it. Now I'm going to apply that to medicine and figure out how to help people understand that these crazy trends like the lemonade diet and all this nonsense is bad for you. But I felt like I couldn't say that unless I knew what to suggest other than that. And so that's how I really got into nutrition. And I think that more doctors need to understand nutrition because all patients, not all, but most patients have a question that somehow relates. You can't tell a patient you need to lose 30 pounds and then they say, well, how do I do it? And they say, well, you should talk to a nutritionist. The doctor should be able to have some reasonable conversation or direct you in some way to try to help you. But a lot of doctors my age, okay, just weren't taught nutrition. But I think the younger people are learning more about nutrition. And you have to, by the way, because now you have all this social media and you have all these crazy trends on social media. Oh my goodness, I get a headache from these things. And they're crazy. And there people are quoting studies that aren't real studies, you know, and they think they know more than you do. It's a mess. So that's how I got involved in nutrition. That's why I did nutrition. And like I said, if you had asked me in medical school, would I be writing about nutrition? I'd be like, are you nuts? Of course not. I have no idea what a calorie is, let alone write about, you know, fiber and, you know, monounsaturated fats. Now it's my language and I love it and it helps people. So I encourage you to definitely go strong on it. It's important.
We have a couple of online questions.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I've got Teresa from, she's actually from Sonora, Mexico. And so she was curious. She said she's 68. She has some difficulties with foods due to migraines, sensitivities, intolerances. So what are the ways that she can adapt your book and what you suggest towards some of her issues to help her with her nutrition and life goals?
How old was she?
68.
Yeah. So in the book, in the decade of the 60s plus, I go over your top 10 power nutrients in the book. So it's very, by the way, I write in a very user-friendly way. I think that I was doing this show called Celebrity Fit Club, and I wrote this book that I thought was the best book in the world. It was called The Take Control Diet. And I went into all this stuff about this is what a calorie is, all this information I thought was so important. And the celebrities on the show, after week 3, they came to me and said, Dr. Ian, we love you, but this book is too much. Like, we can't use this book. Can you just tell us what to eat and tell us when to eat it? Like, just make it simple for us. And I was so hurt. I was like, oh my goodness, I spent all this time doing all this research, you know, trying to give you guys information. And they were like, And I learned a lesson that you have to meet people where they are, right? It's not about what I think. It's about what helps you. Like my mother would say, don't buy a gift for someone necessarily what you want them to have, but what do they actually want? And so I learned a lesson about that. And so my whole career after that embarrassing almost experience was to try to meet people where they are and give them what they need and what they want. In the 60s, so I write the book like this. So in the 60s, on page 51, I go over what the top 10 nutrients are. But what people have to understand, now migraines are very specific, by the way. I mean, I have to have more of a understanding of what the causation is for the migraine. But there are foods that can help with headaches if the migraines aren't caused by other things. And what people have to do is they have to understand that with nutrition, it's trial and error. Like sometimes you got to try things and see whether or not it relieves your symptoms. And it does sometimes. And there's no guarantee. I'm writing a book right now, a menopausal diet book, because my friends keep saying, classmates who are menopausal keep saying, Ian, where's this book? So I'm going to try to write this book. But what I'm learning is that no two women react the same way to the same ingredient. Like it just, we have an idea kind of that this may help and that may help. But one of my friends said to me, she says, I've never had a menopausal symptom. I said, nothing? She said nothing. So, everyone has a different experience. And so my point to you is, in the book, what I try to do is not only do I break down the nutrients for you, I try to tell you how those nutrients will react in your body and whether or not. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't cover migraines because that's a very specific, distinct syndrome that can be caused by a lot of different things. But I think that people realize that there are dietary changes that people can make that may help some of the underlying causes of migraines. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
So, Ian, I have your next book.
Yes.
So your next book is for 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. People are living much longer. Is this on?
I'm not sure the speaker is.
It is. We hear. Yeah.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Because, people are living much longer, and I'm an internist, and I'm taking care of people in their mid to upper 90s. I wasn't trained for that. I mean, because people didn't live that long when I was in training. And, certain things like lactose, for example, as we age, we make less lactase, right? And so when you used to be able to drink a glass of milk and have a cookie, now you get bloating and diarrhea because you're 65 and your intestinal epithelial cells don't have the villi and they're not making lactase or the enzyme that breaks it down. So,
And you're also having problems digesting B12 as you get older.
100%.
Which is a big issue that people don't get tested for.
So anyway, I'll wait for that book. 'Cause
Okay.
I'll use it in my practice.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah. So we also had Renee from Florida, and she was curious about she's vegan or vegetarian, and how we can adapt the book and your nutrition. What can vegetarians and vegans do, I guess, to kind of improve and extend their life as well? Because I know you do have some protein-heavy meals, but you also seem pretty heavy in the vegetarian department as well.
Well, my wife's a vegetarian.
Come back.
I am not a vegetarian, but I was writing a book called Plant Power. And when I was doing my research for Plant Power, I realized how bad my diet was. I was eating so much red meat because I love steak. Oh my goodness, I love steak. Even thinking about it makes me happy. But I was eating too much, And so as I'm researching it, not only was red meat bad health-wise, it was also bad for the environment, which I did not know, by the way. My kids knew, but I didn't. My kids are like way ahead of me. But anyway, so I'm researching this book, writing this book called Plant Power. And what I realized was that, I don't really want to be fully vegetarian, but I want to be 70% plant-based. I was okay with that. I can live with that. And so writing that book changed my life. And so whenever I write books now, after that book, I always make sure that vegetarians and vegans have options. So there are lots of options, always options in my plans. Like I'll say, here's an alternate for those who are vegans or vegetarians. So it's very user-friendly for anyone who's a vegan or vegetarian. I will say this, though. If you're a vegan or vegetarian, and it depends, there are different levels of vegetarians, right? You have to be very careful with vitamin B12. You just do. Because vitamin B12 is it's an animal-based vitamin, and so you may need supplements. And that's one of the big issues for strict vegetarians or vegans, is that they have B12 deficiency a lot of times. They're not getting it. Now, he mentioned protein, but there are tons of non-animal sources of protein, which is great, by the way. In fact, some of the biggest bodybuilders are vegan and vegetarians. They don't even eat meat protein. There's this misconception that in order to have hearty protein, you got to have a good old steak. It's not true. Now, is there more protein in steak? Of course there is. It's more concentrated. But you can eat enough chickpeas, beans, and legumes to make up for it. Yogurt, cheese, all these kinds of dairy products if you eat dairy. So I think that all my books after Plant Power are very friendly to vegans and vegetarians because of my research and my wife who eats that way.
Okay, so I have a question. It's all very well to eat actual foods when you're talking about this, but when you say supplements, how do we know which supplements are safe and which supplements could be just crap at the drugstore?
Good luck. I'm serious. You know why?
No, I don't know.
Because the supplement is an unregulated industry.
Right.
The FDA does not regulate supplements because the lobbyists are very powerful and they give them a lot of money. And it should be regulated because, supplements can hurt people. But there was this, I forget the name of this company. When I was a reporter, there was this company that had a lab. And every week they would test these supplements and would let you know how much was really in there. So if they said that they had, 5,000 international units of vitamin D, they would say it only has 2,000. And I would do so many reports saying that these supplements don't have what they say they have. So I say good luck in the sense of there are reputable companies that you can go to, and that can help, okay? But it's hard to tell. There's no way no one's sitting there testing their products. But I will say this, though. I will definitely say this. The average person doesn't realize that if you eat a relatively healthy, not perfect, a relatively healthy diet, you will probably consume all the vitamins, minerals, nutrients that you need, honestly. If there is something you want to take, okay, one multivitamin. But the business of my wife's grandfather would have a Ziploc bag of 20 things. And I said to him, Mr. Lewis, what are you doing? What is this stuff? It was this, it was that, it was that. You don't need that. You just don't need all of that. But here's my rule. Here's my rule about how to do this. My rule is 70% plant-based, lots of vegetables and fruits, fish, chicken. You are going to get 80% of what you need eating that way. You'll get 80% of it, honestly. And then, of course, if you have deficiencies, there are different reasons, different illnesses may lead to deficiencies, but most people are pretty well covered. For young women in particular, I'm always stressing calcium. I think that young women are not eating enough calcium in this day and age. It's a problem. And on the other end of it, I think not enough people over the age of 60 are eating enough protein. Wait, are you a nutrition doctor?
Myself?
Yes.
Obesity.
Oh, obesity.
So, but I did do nutritional, I did that little bit when I was doing obesity.
What do you think about protein? Do you think people eat enough protein? That's a big topic, by the way, is protein.
We actually just covered that last week with the culinary club. Well, I really think that the RDA's recommendations are probably outdated and they need to be updated. I think at this point it's 0.8 per kilo of ideal body weight. And I think that's just to prevent protein deficiency.
Right.
But in general, most experts, based on all the studies we have, agree that between 1.0 to 1.2, even up to 1.6 gram per kilo of ideal body weight would be actually enough or even necessary for most older adults, as long as they don't have kidney issues,
Sure.
or, some things.
Yeah.
But I think so when I counsel my patient on nutritional overall recommendations, I tell them 1.0 to 1.6 based on their, of course, activity level and other things that they do. But 0.8, I do think it's a little bit lower than what all of us should be doing.
Yeah. This is great. I'm glad to talk to another professional about this. So my recommendation has been that people need to eat 0.75 to 1 gram of protein per desired weight, okay? So if you want to weigh 100, and I'm making 100, who wants to weigh 100 pounds? But if you want to, just for easy math, it's late for me. If you want to weigh 100 pounds, then between 75 and 100 grams, okay? That's what the thing is. Now, let me talk about why protein. This is my biggest takeaway for people 50, 60 plus, is that protein is the building block of muscle. And not enough people in this country are stressing the building of muscle. Am I asking you to be bulky? No, that's never going to happen. So let's stop that conversation. But what I'm saying is that as people get older, and we talked about this last time I was here, that people are
being really older. That's why. Right. I know. I'm kind of a test case for you.
Yeah. I got after her about this. Is that cardio's great, right? great for your heart, great for your pulmonary system, your lungs. It's great. Cardio is wonderful. But if you really look at if you had to choose one exercise that actually can affect more organ systems and give you a greater impact on health, believe it or not, it's resistance training. Okay? Resistance training. What is resistance training? That's either weightlifting or using bands, resistance bands. And not enough people are doing it. I'm telling you. It's the quote unquote, to me, the fountain of youth. Now, let me give you an example of this. When I was in residency and doing rehab, so I was dealing with people who had either strokes, traumatic brain injury, or sports injuries. That's what rehab docs do. And when I was on the ward, when the patients came in from TBI or stroke, the patients that had the shortest stay and bounced back the fastest were the manual laborers. The janitors, the truck drivers, the butchers, plumbers, the guys who were using their hands always bounced back fastest. I mean, it was incredible. And the people who had long stays, white collar executives, lawyers, doctors. We had some doctors, by the way, seriously, because they just aren't physically active like that. And so my big push on this book when I'm on TV is when I get to the 60s plus generation, I always say, lift more weights, eat more protein, and build muscle. Lifting a 2-pound dumbbell is not going to do it. It's not. Because muscle is built by challenge. You have to tear muscle down for it to rebuild stronger. And so if you're lifting 5-pound weights like this, it's nothing. You should feel some fatigue in your muscle. That's when you know you're doing it right. So my biggest takeaway for those 60s plus is lift weights. Do you need to belong to a gym? No. You can get nice resistance bands. You can get dumbbells from Walmart. And there are tons of videos online. I have an app that's free, but there are tons of ways that you can lift and build muscle. And I will tell you that I believe a big reason why people of a certain age are falling a lot is because they have muscle discrepancy. And, when you're young, rehab docs are gait specialists. When you're young, you don't think about where your feet are going. You have proprioception. You don't think about it. It just happens automatically. As you get older, you lose that a little bit. It's just part of aging. And so you start clipping the curb. You start almost missing the step. And what happens is when people have weak lower extremities, okay, that contributes to it. It really does. Muscles are also good because they help your joints. Muscles help absorb pressure that otherwise will go right to your joints. So, a whole nother conversation is about increasing muscle strength, but that's the golden rule for older people. I just think it is.
Anyone else have a question? Whoa, way back here. We'll get to you. You can, Chris, but still, I'm going to let this lady go. No, sorry, you go first. I'll go over here.
Hey, I'm Denise Milstein. I'm a physician with Julia at Mayo. I do integrative medicine. So maybe it was consumer labs that you're talking about.
Oh, that's right. That's it.
They test the supplements to see if they are what they say they are. I have a little bit of a tangential question.
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea of thinking about your career creatively and that we all have different paths. I work in integrative medicine. I also talk about books and health. Can you talk about how you decided to write fiction and what that's been like for your
Sure.
career?
Let me just say, by the way, when I first started doing reporting, I was a big fan of integrative medicine, and no one would touch the topic. And I couldn't find a lot of doctors who did integrative medicine, but I would go to them and do stories on them because I felt as though the mainstream media was always wanted to go into the, I was in New York, so the Cornells and the Mount Sinai's. They didn't want to talk to the integrated people. Now, it's a big deal now, and it's acceptable, which is wonderful. See, medicine evolves too, like everything else. But back when I was doing it, it was very taboo.
So here I come. Getting my exercise.
So integrative medicine is the overlap of conventional medicine with natural healing practices for the purpose of promoting health and healing. So the distinction is in conventional medicine, very focused on disease management and kind of quote cure, where in integrative medicine, it's really about health promotion, regardless of your burden of disease, pulling from conventional medicine, but also how you eat, how you move, how you manage your stress, how you sleep. if you want to use natural products.
Yeah.
Let
Absolutely.
me just add something as a Mayo patient. Whenever I go or have a procedure or something, there's a very complicated, or at least lengthy, it's not complicated, questionnaire. And one of the questions they ask you relates to not just your physical health, but your mental health. You know, are you depressed? Are you, doing this and that? And it gets annoying to do it on a regular basis, but I do think that it's really a good thing, to force people to think about, no, it's not just my arm or, my bunion or something. It's, how is that affecting me emotionally, physically? Am I less active? Am I not eating right? And so I think that's really helpful. I don't know if other medical institutions, I've been a male patient for how long now? 25 years? Maybe 30. I don't have any experience with other medical providers, but it would be great if everybody adopted that sort of similar patient questionnaire approach.
Well, when I was doing it, it was not very common. I can tell you that. I know now it's more common now through my wife and through my mother-in-law. But I didn't realize that 40 million people suffer from anxiety disorders. 40 million. And that anxiety and depression are a tandem because they have similar biological pathways. And so half of people with depression have also anxiety disorder. And so it's important to ask about that. Before, it was very taboo to do that. You didn't know how to ask. You didn't want to offend the patient because there's like, are you calling me crazy, right? And so we couldn't figure out how to ask them in a way. The good news about the mental illness, mental health boom of acknowledgement is that we can all talk about it and no one feels like it's a problem. Like my kids could say, Dad, I want a mental health day. And I said, okay. My wife says, the kids, yeah, no problem. Because we get it now. Like, you got to look after people's mental health. You just can't run. I'm a type A guy, but you can't always be that way. You know what I mean? So anyway, yes, I think more hospitals are in tune to it. I'm happy it's happening. And people need to think about, like, for example, the reason why I was excited about hybrid working during COVID and people working at home. Listen, I always work at home, so I don't have a boss. My house is my office. But I was so excited for my family and friends to be at home during the day because I felt like their mental health was much better being in a more relaxed environment and not always having the pressure of going to the office, having someone on top of them all the time. And so I was a big fan of it. I just thought it was beautiful. It was wonderful. And, I won't get into the arguments. People said, well, people are less productive. I don't necessarily agree with that they were less productive. I think that America, we have such rigid traditions that we don't open our minds to try something different because we've always done it this way. And I think that's a mistake. I think that we evolve as a society and we should try different things. I think that, giving women just 3 months maternity leave is ridiculous. A woman has to bond with the baby. That's just a natural thing. It's a beautiful, natural thing. And to say, well, you only get 3 months. If you want more, we're not going to pay you. I just think that's just not right. And so I think that we have to change how we do a lot of things. I think our work day is too long, honestly. I think that, anyway, I have a lot of opinions about, and this is me traveling to other countries and seeing how they do it, and they do it very well, and they're very happy, and I just think we're still the greatest country, I think, but I think we can make some adjustments, honestly. Now, my fiction. So I always loved fiction, okay? Always, when I was a kid. And I always loved detective fiction. And what happened was, when I was in undergrad, I was a member of a secret society in college. And, sorry, it's true. And so I was a member of the secret society. And it was very mysterious. And I don't know why they wanted me to be a member, because I wasn't rich. I wasn't, I had no lineage at this very famous school. And I didn't know what these places were. And I got this letter was slipped under my door at my house, my dorm. And it was an invitation to a cocktail party for this organization I didn't know anything about. It turns out it was a secret society. It was very prestigious. And I decided to go because I say yes until I figure it out. So I went to this thing. I had no idea what I was going to. And I was just intrigued by it and the history of it. Like, all these presidents had been members and, famous senators and Supreme Court justice. Anyway, I did this thing. But when I was there, I was like, wow, what a great story this would make. Because I always think about the regular guy, because I'm a regular guy. And so I was like, wow, so many people don't realize what's happening in these clubs. Like, you know, all this stuff is happening. Like, you know, they're taking us to these really like fancy dinners at wealthy alums' houses. They're flying us to New York. And we're just little poor college students. Well, I was, they weren't. But, but I was just fascinated by this world of privilege and wealth and secrecy and the history of it. You know, JFK, all these guys were members of these clubs. And so I started writing a novel loosely based on my experience as an undergrad. And I would keep writing on it and just keep saving it and saving it. And I said, well, one day maybe I can publish this thing. But then I got into medicine. And, you know, life becomes medicine. But I always had this itching to write and publish my fiction. And so when I got a chance, I got a literary agent, and you know my health books started doing very well. And Barbara knows that publishers want you to keep doing what you're doing. But my passion was also with fiction, because I just love, I love love stories. For example, I just sold a love story. I love all this stuff. Anyway, so I got an agent, and I told my publisher, I said, listen, you know you're making a lot of money off these health books. So if you want my next one, you got to publish my fiction. So I used my leverage to get it done. And they did it. They had to do it. Or there was no more of this. And so anyway, that's how I started publishing the fiction. And my detective series is because I just love detective. I love crime fiction. My wife asked me to not watch this stuff at night, but I just can't stop. You know why I think it is actually why I like it so much? And I think it's part of being a doctor. Being a doctor is being a detective, actually. Think about it. Like a patient walks into your office, you've never met them before, and you're asking them questions, and you got to figure things out, right? It's classic being a detective. And so the curiosity of trying to figure out how is this connected to that and what caused that, I think just lends itself to me writing crime fiction.
I'm going to speak up and say to you all that you really ought to buy one of. This is not a commercial pitch. This is actually a not-for-profit bookstore. This is something I started when I was almost 50, and my husband, who Dr. Files knows, said to me the most enabling thing anybody ever said to me. He said, "Now that you can do whatever you want," because I was retired, "what is it you're going to do?" Meaning, sitting around the house, Barbara, is not going to be what you're going to do. And, you know, lawyers can have new lives too. Very useful for book selling. But anyway, I do think that you would learn a lot about Ian reading his crime fiction that you would not learn reading his diet book, because, you know, an author has to put some of himself or herself into the characters that they write. And so it's, in a way, all fiction is somewhat autobiographical. Would you agree with that?
100%. Ash Kane is a guy, when I die and come back, as I want to be. It's that simple.
I
just
wish
like
I'd
this.
known him when I was young in Chicago. It would have
You
been
might not be
great.
married to Rob, I'll tell you that.
No, well, no. I mean, your mother and I are contemporaries, so it's never going to work out. But anyway, I'm really serious that if you're enjoying this, you really ought to pick up one of his mysteries, just because you would see a different facet of his character. And now you had a question, Chris. Let me go back to you.
I read somewhere that 830 million people have diabetes. Will this help?
100%.
They also say it can be reversed, so you're not diabetic.
Okay, well,
I'm
Yeah.
type 2, so it's
Yeah.
not a pancreas issue per se.
yeah.
So
Well, you can probably do more than I can on this right now, but let me answer the first part, and then you go in, okay? Type 2 diabetes, yes, it's rampant. It's increased dramatically. The numbers are staggering, by the way. And it's not just type 2 diabetes, it's pre-diabetes. You know, there are tens of millions of people who are pre-diabetic and don't even know it, which means they're on the fence of diabetes. But in not all cases, but in many cases of diabetes, it's about lifestyle, you know, and risk factors for type 2 diabetes. And I think, actually, when you think about it, it's really a shame for this country, with all the money and all the knowledge that we have rates that just keep going up and up and up. Type 2 diabetes, hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, high cholesterol. And these are killing people. These diseases are truncating so many lives unnecessarily. So prediabetes is reversible. Some type 2 diabetes is reversible. But I'm going to hand it over to you to get into a little more of the.
Well, type 2 diabetes is not a lack of insulin. It's the presence of insulin resistance at the cellular level. And obesity impacts that.
Well, hold on. But see, hold on. Now, this is the TV guy in me. But insulin resistance is a big word. Explain.
Yeah, it just
what-
means that insulin doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so instead of lowering your sugar levels, it's not working. So your sugar levels are running high. You're running sweet, And the best defense against that is weight loss, which sounds easy, but that's the hardest thing, right? And there has been a revolution in weight loss in the last few years, which Dr. Harder can speak to better than me, but we have a lot of new medications that are available, although they're incredibly expensive, and they do make a difference in people who have struggled forever with an inability to lose weight. And one of my bariatric specialty friends mentioned to me that his approach to his patients is always, it's 80% of what you eat and 20% of what you do when you're trying to lose weight. And we
like
as
that.
Americans have to change our dietary habits, Hostess cupcakes. I mean, we grew up on that, and it's a lot of processed foods. And, humans were not meant. So one of my nerdy hobbies is evolutionary biology. Very nerdy, but very interesting to me. And, humans were not meant to have 3 square meals a day. We were meant to survive in periods of famine when we didn't have food. And so, the American culture is toxic. The standard American diet, SAD, is sad.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
Yeah. I'm going to say something. Can you give her the microphone too? The rates of obesity in this country are outrageous, and obesity, back when I was in med school, we didn't really have a lot of understanding of obesity and all of the consequences of obesity. Now we're understanding it so much better now. And when you talk about insulin resistance, your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin helps your body eat up the sugar. But if your insulin's not working, then that sugar is staying in your blood system, and then you have problems. And obesity is the number one reason why people who are type 2 diabetics are having insulin resistance. And so you're right. Trying to lose weight, there's some stats, like just even losing 10% of your body weight can make a big difference for people who are overweight or obese. But losing weight and going to a more plant-based diet and reducing the amount of added sugars are killing us in this country, and these processed ingredients can make a big difference. If I had my druthers, the Twinkies and the coffee cakes and all this stuff that has 30 ingredients in there and would be gone. And there's no reason why our country, once again, with all the knowledge we have and all the money we have, there's no real reason why our average person cannot have access to healthier food. It's the food that is leading to all these diseases, that is leading to all the expensive medical treatments that's costing everyone, by the way. We're all paying for each other, right? It's not like, well, you're eating bad, so it doesn't. No, it affects me too, by the way. It all comes around. And I just think that we're in a bad situation and that needs to change, which is why I write so many diet books, because I'm always trying to figure out what is a different way to get to someone to try to, because not one diet book doesn't work for everyone. So I would try to figure out a new angle for someone.
I think you both covered the topic so well, but the one additional thing I see in my practice is lack of activity. So diet is one thing, but I feel like I see radiologists and I see physicians and I see medical students and I talk to nurses, and if you ask them on an average, what does your day look like? I don't even ask them, do you exercise? Because I find that question to be a little judgy.
Yeah.
Do you exercise? And if the answer is no, they already know you're going to lecture them. So I start with, take me through your day. Like, what does your day look like? What are your eating habits? Do you eat your breakfast? What does your typical breakfast look like? And that opens up doors. And I think my students know this, but that's my traditional way. And you'll be surprised. People have less than 5,000 steps, 3,000 steps on a daily basis. And if you look at how activity level is classified, under 5,000 steps a day, it's considered to be a sedentary person. Now, I remembered having this conversation with the students, and some days they were getting less than 3,000 steps a day, right? So it's diet is one part, but right now the statistics all over the world for obesity have gone up. So not just United States, but 70% people in the US are either overweight or obese, and 40% are obese. And the sad part is when
Well,
you
hold on
look
for a minute,
at
guys. 70%. You know how big that number is? 7 out of 10 people walking down the street
Yeah.
are either overweight or obese.
overweight or obese.
Go ahead.
Obesity is about 40%. And not just that, but if you look state by state, Colorado was the only state that was in green, meaning that it wasn't in that category. Not anymore. So I feel like it's diet is one part, but also the lack of day-to-day activities. We have such convenience now, and it actually works against us. We walk less, we stand less, and so it's funny, I used to do this before I did my obesity fellowship. I remember asking my boys to get me water. Like, can you get me a glass of water? I don't do that anymore. I'm like, oh, there's like 10 more steps, 5 more steps. And that's something that I talk to my patients. I'm like, it doesn't always have to be 1 hour of gym time. It could be how much do you move? There's a new study that just came out that said even when you are sitting and you move your calf muscles, it actually triggers some degree of activity. So anything you can grab is a good thing. So
Well, hold on. While you're there, let's talk about these GLP-1 agonists.
yes,
Let's
yes.
open that
It's my
Pandora's
favorite
box.
topic.
Yeah, I know. Let's see where you and I fall on this. So you're on one? Okay. Which one? Okay. So let's Ozempic, the GLP-1 agonists, okay? Which, by the way, started out as type 2 diabetes drugs.
Yes.
So they weren't weight loss drugs, but as a side effect, they realized that people were losing weight by it. Okay, so then people, of course,
But it isn't a long-term thing on that, because I've been on Ozempic for almost 5 years.
And
I did lose weight,
but you plateaued.
but it
Yes.
stopped and then it came back.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
it's not a permanent solution in my mind.
okay. Well, let me just say one thing. I want you to go because this is your stuff right here. Because I'm the diet guy, so I'm not a medication guy. I'm like, let's do some lifestyle stuff. That's just kind of my stick. But this is my take on Ozempic. You ready? You may not like this, by the way.
I might like it. You might be surprised.
Okay, let's see. Okay, here's my take. On social media, I said Ozempic and other GLP-1 agonists are low-calorie diets in disguise. Because people on these medications are consuming a lot less calories. And so I'm calling it a low-calorie diet, but it's in disguise. You know, I've always been saying you got to eat less calories than, you know, you burn off. That's just kind of a but there are other things it does, right?
Yes.
It gives you satiety. I get that. But that, to me, you know, you look at Serena Williams, for example. I'm not picking on Serena Williams, by the way. She's had enough issues after the Super Bowl halftime performance. But, sorry. But I'm not picking on her. I like Serena Williams. I love tennis, by the way. But look at Serena Williams. My wife and I are like, what is going on? Now, she's never declared that she is, you know.
Oh, she's on Ozempic? I didn't.
You know, this is being broadcast, so I'm not gonna,
Okay.
you know, do anything that, you know, my lawyers, you know. But anyway, I'm just saying that a lot of people are on these GLP-1 agonists, and they are very effective. But my whole point has been that you still need to change your lifestyle behaviors.
100%.
So I'm gonna go off the mic and let you. You're the expert.
Yeah, so can I just say this? So the GLPs, the reason why they are so effective, and not just GLPs, but GLP plus GIP, the tirzepatide Mounjaro is even more effective than Ozempic. And the reason for that is there are 3 different mechanisms, but the one that stands out and that's actually better than all of the weight loss medications is the way they work on your hypothalamus, on your appetite and satiety pathways, right? So it's not just decrease in your gastric emptying or decrease
Whoa. You're using fancy words. You
in
got to.
slowing down your digestion, or
Yeah.
you eat less because you just can't eat a whole lot of food at one time because you feel full really fast. But the other thing is that addiction part of it, which is so effective. So people who are used to eating large calories, they start to kind of condition themselves in eating smaller portions. Having said that, the second part, what you said, is extremely important, which is changing your habits. So we do know there are about 50 genes that cause obesity. So there are some patients you just see family of like genetics, you see the grandparents are obese, the parents are obese, and children are obese. Now, in those patients, they may need to be on these medications for a long time because there is genetic disposition to obesity.
Sure.
The majority of patients also need complete lifestyle like makeover. And what that means is two arms to the treatment. Medications, it's like hypertension. You don't ever give patients just medications and send them home. You talk to them about what is low sodium diet, what is heart healthy diet, what does DASH mean, why does exercise matter in lowering your blood pressure. And it is very similar. My gripe with the way the medication is dispensed right now in many places is patients get zero education on how much protein, what type of exercise, what type of foods, how do you change your food noise? How do you go from eating, emotional eating to regulating your emotions? And that part, I would say, is 60% of the battle. Because if you just leave them on medications, you're right, they will lose weight because the medications are powerful. These are the only medications that come close to bariatric surgery.
Yeah.
That's how much weight loss we get. But the other part, nobody's having detailed conversations. People need scans to look at their muscle mass and fat mass.
Did you have any of that? See?
And that's why people plateau or stop losing weight, is it stops working after a while.
Now my A1C is great.
Right. I mean, it's a great medication for diabetes. For obesity, though, it has to be very strategic. And what I have noticed in my practice is people who do practice a progressive loading, so not just weight training, but they are building their weights gradually and building their muscle.
You say really fancy words, by the way.
I do. So I think they do better.
John, did you have a question?
I go to Scottsdale Weight Loss Center. I've been on it for quite a while.
John, you need the microphone.
Do I?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi.
By the way, good selection of team, New York Giants. Excuse me, those New York football Giants. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
I go to the Scottsdale Weight Loss Center. I've been going there for quite a while, and I've lost over 80 pounds. I don't take blood pressure medicine anymore. My cholesterol is controlled. On Thursday nights, they have classes online with a psychologist and so on. I don't eat any foods that I used to love: pepperoni, sausage, cheese by the pound. And I've done well. I really control. I don't eat, as I say, I don't eat the foods I used to like. If we go out to dinner, I share dinner with my lady, and I'm doing quite well.
See, this is what I mean. This is why I say nutrition is so essential, you guys. Even if I don't care what field you go into, but you have to have a basic understanding, because almost all of your patients, either them or a family member, will have nutrition-related stuff, and you have to have a basic understanding of it so you can.
Let me interject.
Yeah.
So, one of the biggest problems that we are encountering in medicine is the shortened time that you have with your patients. And you have so many things to address. Nutrition falls to the back. Your approach, which is the global approach, by reaching millions of people with your books, is so laudable. And I appreciate it because, when you don't have the time to do the one-on-one, and you can't get them into the nutritionist because there aren't appointments, right? We need books. And you have used your celebrity to good purpose, right? Because people will listen to you because they've gained your trust. So I applaud your effort. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing.
Thank you for that. Yes, 1 second. I also feel like I'm one guy, right? I'm retiring soon, right? So I feel like there needs to be a whole new wave of professionals who are not just looking at conventional medicine, but also talking about food is thy medicine. It really is. And you talk about the lifestyle changes you've made. Those are hard changes. Like when I've been doing this for so many years, the psychology part of it is so difficult. People know to eat better. They know they need to exercise. We all know that. But why aren't they doing it? There are a lot of deep psychological things that exist. And people say, well, you just got to be disciplined. It's not just discipline, right? What's underneath there? So I applaud you and the changes you have made, saying you share dinner. Those are the kind of things that actually make a difference.
One other thing I do 4 protein drinks a day, and I do 1 regular meal a day. I do a dinner in the evening, but I do four 8-ounce protein drinks a day, and I've been doing it for a year, and that's part of my routine. Plus, I walk 3 to 5 miles every night. Well, 5 nights a week, Monday through Friday.
See, there's
And that's part of my routine, and I follow it religiously, and it's made a world of difference.
yes. Barbara?
Coming. Which one of you is first?
So thank you for all your great insights. I actually work with Julia in her office. I wanted to make a comment about some of the statistics. You know, there's a global statistic that we can say the number of people who are obese or the number of people who are overweight. But let's not forget it's very regional. There are states that are markedly healthier. Most of us probably live in North Scottsdale or Paradise Valley or one of these areas. And does anyone know the life expectancy difference between South Phoenix and North Scottsdale? You guys know?
It's about 71 years in South Phoenix and 85 in Scottsdale, I believe.
14 years. 14-year difference in a 25 mile, right? So I think when we talk about some of these things, we talk about food, how do you eat? We have to acknowledge food deserts. If anyone's ever been to a reservation, they have nothing there, you know. I think you guys could make some comments. And I think one of the things is I would love to know how, and Julia's right? We have short appointments. Actually, we actually have long appointments. So we do actually talk about nutrition quite a bit. We have 2 things. The first is we have huge barrage of information for a lot of our people who read this on social media, TikTok. People don't know how to do critical appraisal. Evidence-based medicine, what is the study they should look at? And I know you're referring to that. So there's that aspect which does affect so many of our patients. But the other aspect is there's a whole group of people who can't afford to get good food, who can't afford the drugs that will actually save their lives. And that is a disproportionate number of people who are overweight and obese as well.
So my wife, in her clinics, she treats uninsured and underinsured. They don't care what your insurance is, they treat you. That, to me, is medicine, right? Like, the reason why I got into medicine was to help people. And it's become such a problem. You talk about that disparity in life expectancy. That's unacceptable in our country, to me, as a human being. Because, listen, at the end of the day, I say, even if you live to be 100, life is still too short, right? It is. So to me, the idea that you can lop off 14 years of another human being's life, think about how much they didn't get a chance to do. Think about their loved ones who could have had 14 more years with them. It's just sad to me. Just as a human being, it's sad to me. And I was just having this conversation with the family that I was staying with here in North Scottsdale. We were having this conversation heading back from the golf course. And, you know, the wife was, she's beautiful. She's very sweet. And she was saying, all this stuff is a shame. Why can't people be nicer to each other? And she really meant that. Her husband, of course, who's the business guy, is saying, you're being unrealistic, you know. But she was saying, no, I'm serious. She says, what harm is it that other people can live like a longer life or live a better quality of life? What harm is it to you? What skin is it off of your back? And that's how I've approached my career, which is that I don't really care what your politics are. I don't care about your race, your age. I don't care. My job, because I've been blessed to get information that other people can't, my job is to try to give you information to make your life better. You know, I don't care who you voted for. I care that you get a chance. If you're going to live 80 years, I want you to live all 80 years, right? Because that's, I think, the humanistic thing for me to want to do. I don't want you to live shorter. I want you to live the best you can. We may disagree on stuff, but okay. Life is bigger than everything.
Well, and I think, you know, to your point, we've extended the lifespan, but we need to work on the well span, right? And we'd like to get them to be equal, because nobody wants to live in a nursing home paralyzed on one side. We want to live vibrantly and fully as long as we possibly can.
I think there was one more question here. And then I will say that our experience is that sitting in these chairs for 9 minutes.
Oh, Barbara, you and your euphemisms of "get out of my store."
I would recommend that maybe everybody get up and move around and talk to the doctors.
So, at the risk of closing with something that's slightly controversial, I do think in the presence of so many medical students, it's really important that we talk about weight maintenance and metabolic health as opposed to continued talk about weight loss. People who are resourced and have obesity know they should lose weight, and they can still optimize their health even when we're using factors or markers like a simple BMI. So as someone who's careful with words, I wonder if you can inspire these medical students how you talk about healthy weight at every weight.
So when I first started doing this, let me give you a story to get into the answer. So when I was doing Celebrity Fit Club, this TV show I was doing was on VH1, and we had all these celebrities. It was like their second chance at becoming famous again. And I was the weight loss guru. Then we had a psychologist. Then we had a drill sergeant who was the tough guy who would make them go to the boot camp. But my role was basically to talk about, weight loss and how they were doing. And every week they'd come to the scale and I'd weigh them. You ever see the show? Totally. Yeah. So you know what I did. So I was a cool guy, very calm. I didn't really.
Students, reality TV right here.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that was a big show for me. But I'll never forget this. So we had this plus size model named Takara. She was very beautiful, very curvaceous. And she just kept saying, I don't need to lose weight. I look great. And why am I losing weight? And I said, well, Takara, it's not an aesthetic judgment that I'm making. I'm making a judgment on the predictive value of where you are. And I want you to be at a healthy weight so you lower your risk factors for different diseases. And she just couldn't get out of her head that she looks good, that guys like the way she looked. So, and I realized that the way I was talking to her wasn't registering, and that you have to talk and use language that is sensitive and people can relate to. And it wasn't working with her. And my approach to her was not really good. On the flip side, in black culture, for example, they have this theory that the reason why black people are heavier is because we have bigger bones, right? Or they say big boned. Okay, that's one of our things. So we had this guy named Bone Crusher, who was a rapper, who was about 400 pounds, and he was huge, and a great rapper, by the way. But anyway, so Crusher, we call him Crusher. So Crusher's on the show, and Crusher says to me, he gets to the scale, and I was the first person to speak to them. I say, hey, Crusher, how'd the week go? And we'd have a little back and forth. And he said, Dr. Ian, my bones are bigger than yours. That's why I'm bigger than everybody else. I was like, well, Crusher, that's ridiculous. Your bones are no bigger than mine. They are bigger than mine. I'm big boned since I was a little kid. This is a cultural thing. You got to be sensitive to. So what did I do? I said, okay. I said to my producers after the show, I said, let's do a little experiment. I said, let's take an x-ray of my bones. We'll take an x-ray of his bones. Next week when he comes on the scale, we're going to put up the x-rays in a light box and see if he can pick out his bones versus mine. What do you think happened? He picked out my bones as his. So I give you that story to say that the way you talk to people about weight and maintenance is very important. And like you said about saying, do you exercise? No way. That's the worst thing you could say to someone, but trying to figure out kind of what does your day look like? That's elegant interviewing, and my psychiatrist mother-in-law teaches me how to be a better interviewer even now, because I'm dealing with an addiction situation for someone. And she's like, you have to have better interviewing skills. And so I want to say that, when you talk about weight maintenance and weight loss, you have to be very careful about how you couch the language, how you address the language, and you also have to know your personnel. You do. People in different cultures have different responses to these terms and these concepts, and you have to be sensitive. And you guys, you young people now, are more sensitive, and you're taught cultural competency and awareness. We weren't, by the way. It just, this is how it goes. This is how you talk to a patient. And it just doesn't work that way. You have to treat each patient as an individual and be respectful that they come from different, customs and cultures, and they may see things differently. My Italian friends have a whole different way that they look at things, and they teach me, and so anyway, I think it's an issue, and I think that the way we talk about it needs to be better, and I'm very encouraged that you guys will be better than we are. And I'm not saying we're bad, but I'm saying you have more opportunities than we do, right? I think that too, right? 100%. Yeah, you have more opportunities, and I also think you guys are smarter than us. I really believe that, but
And they have to learn way more than we did because medicine has become so complex.
yeah.
So it's gotten harder.
Yeah.
It's harder.
Yeah, and we need to keep having good people be in medicine. The country is going to be in trouble if the really good people don't go into medicine. I'm serious. We need people who are smart, who are dedicated, who are going to look after our collective health.
So we're going to send you to Washington?
Never.
Never.
I have a
Right.
wife. I have a wife and 2 kids, and I would never drag my family through the swamp of Washington.
I hear you.
Anyway, guys, thank you. I just want to, in closing, say this. Barbara does a wonderful thing. This is a great bookstore. Please support. As an author, there are very few independent bookstores left. Seriously. And please keep supporting this store. You can order online from the store. But it's just wonderful to have a place like this that we as authors can come and have a conversation on an evening. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, it's been my pleasure, I assure you. So I would like to say 3 things. My staff, I'm 84, and I'm basically the Energizer Bunny in the bookstore. How does that work? And I would give you 3 recommendations.